The U.S. Supreme Court has just issued a major ruling.
House would keep gun owners' information private.
A family in Texas opens their mailbox to find a letter from their insurance company. Policy canceled. The reason? During a routine home inspection, they mentioned owning firearms for self-defense. No claims, no violations, just ownership. Their renewal offer comes with a 48% premium increase and zero coverage for anything firearm-related. This isn't an isolated incident. It's part of a coordinated pattern that's reshaping gun ownership in America without Congress passing a single bill. Recent intelligence briefings reveal 5 systematic threats targeting Second Amendment rights through channels most gun owners never monitor. These aren't the debates you see on television. These are quiet bureaucratic shifts, corporate policy changes, and technological systems making gun ownership practically impossible, and most people won't notice until it's too late. Between 2021 and 2024, 73% of major homeowners' insurance providers either raised premiums for gun owners or added specific exclusions for firearm-related incidents. State Farm, Allstate, and Farmers Insurance have all revised their policies to exclude coverage for any incident involving firearms stored in the home, even when owners followed every safety protocol perfectly. The implications are staggering. Without insurance coverage, gun ownership becomes a massive financial liability. One accidental discharge, one theft, one incident of any kind, and homeowners face potentially bankrupting costs with zero protection. Insurance companies aren't being mandated by government to implement these changes. They're doing it voluntarily, creating a financial barrier that functions exactly like a ban without the political cost of legislation. The stories get worse. A shooting instructor in Colorado maintained liability insurance for 19 years without filing a single claim. His policy was suddenly non-renewed with no explanation provided. When he searched for replacement coverage, the lowest quote jumped from $1,400 annually to $11,000 for identical coverage. Several companies that previously specialized in coverage for firearms instructors, range operators, and competitive shooters have completely exited the market. This creates a cascading effect. Without affordable insurance, shooting ranges close. Instructors can't operate. Gun safety education becomes inaccessible. The infrastructure supporting responsible gun ownership collapses from economic pressure alone. Healthcare providers are now documenting firearm ownership in medical records, and that information is being weaponized in ways that directly threaten gun rights. The American Academy of Pediatrics recommends doctors ask about firearms in every patient household as part of routine safety screening. Sounds reasonable on the surface, right? Here's what they don't tell you. That casual conversation with your pediatrician creates permanent medical documentation accessible in legal proceedings, background checks, and insurance underwriting. Since 2022, over 42% of pediatricians report asking about household firearms during well-child visits. That information goes directly into electronic health records shared across entire healthcare networks. One veteran in Oregon sought therapy for adjustment issues after deployment. Standard intake paperwork documented that he owned firearms. Routine information collection. 6 months later, after a neighbor dispute, that neighbor filed an extreme risk protection order. The medical records showing both therapy attendance and gun ownership became supporting evidence against him. The Department of Veterans Affairs has been specifically flagged for sharing medical information with the National Instant Criminal Background Check System. Between 2021 and 2024, over 18,000 veterans were added to the Prohibited Persons Database based on VA medical determinations about mental competency, often without any judicial hearing or due process. Think about what this means. Veterans who served their country, who sought help for service-related issues, are being stripped of constitutional rights based on medical records they assumed were confidential. The chilling effect is obvious. Veterans who need mental health support avoid seeking it because doing so could cost them their Second Amendment rights. Major corporations are implementing workplace policies that prohibit employees from owning firearms, not just at work, but anywhere, anytime. These restrictions are expanding rapidly across industries. Delta Airlines, Kroger, and several financial institutions have updated employee handbooks to include provisions about firearm ownership. Delta's policy prohibits employees from transporting firearms in personal vehicles in company parking lots, even if the firearms are legally owned and the vehicle is private property. One Delta employee in Georgia, a state with strong gun rights protections, was terminated after a security sweep detected a firearm in his locked personal truck. Amazon updated its workplace violence policy requiring employees who own firearms to notify management if they participate in competitive shooting sports or firearms training. These legal activities are classified as elevated risk behaviors. One Amazon warehouse supervisor in Pennsylvania was fired after posting photos from a weekend hunting trip on personal social media. The company cited workplace violence policy and claimed the posts created an uncomfortable environment, despite the activity being completely legal and occurring during personal time. Federal contractors face even stricter requirements. Companies with government contracts are implementing policies requiring employees working on federal projects to be firearms-free, not just at work, but in their homes. One defense contractor in Virginia requires employees with security clearances to certify annually that they do not own firearms, classifying ownership itself as a security risk. The pattern is clear. Corporations are imposing conditions on employment that force workers to choose between their livelihood and their constitutional rights. No legislation required, no public debate, just policy updates in employee handbooks that most people never read carefully. Technology companies and payment processors are building a comprehensive surveillance system tracking every firearm-related transaction, compiling this data into searchable databases accessible to multiple entities. Visa and MasterCard implemented a new merchant category code specifically for firearm and ammunition retailers in 2023. Every purchase at a gun store is now flagged and tracked separately from general sporting goods purchases. Major banks, including J.P. Morgan Chase, Bank of America, and Wells Fargo, are using this transaction data in internal risk assessment models. One gun owner in Arizona had his credit card declined at a firearms retailer despite having available credit and no fraud alerts. When he called the bank, they explained his account had been flagged for unusual firearms-related spending patterns. Translation: the bank decided he was buying too many guns and cut off his access to his own money. Social media companies are implementing content policies that go beyond prohibiting illegal sales to restricting any firearm-related content whatsoever. Online retailers are implementing purchase limits and sharing buyer information across platforms. One person who purchased firearm accessories from multiple online retailers over several months discovered these separate companies were sharing purchase data, building a profile of his buying habits without his knowledge or consent. Google, Amazon, and Apple store search history and purchase data related to firearms in user profiles that can be accessed by law enforcement with a subpoena. These companies maintain this data indefinitely, creating a permanent searchable record of everyone who has ever researched firearm purchases, watched gun-related content, or made firearm-adjacent purchases online. The regulatory framework has become so complex and contradictory that law-abiding gun owners are being arrested and prosecuted for violations they didn't know existed. Prosecutors are using these cases to create chilling effects on gun ownership. Federal law, state law, and local ordinances often contradict each other, creating legal traps where compliance with one law means violation of another. One gun owner in New Jersey legally purchased a handgun in Pennsylvania where he worked and attempted to transport it home following what he believed were proper procedures. He was arrested at a traffic stop and charged with illegal firearm transportation because New Jersey requires a specific permit to transport handguns that Pennsylvania doesn't recognize. The ATF has issued over 60 clarifications and guidance documents since 2021, many contradicting previous guidance or creating new interpretations of existing regulations. One egregious example involves pistol braces, accessories that millions of gun owners legally purchased and installed. Overnight, these legal accessories became potential felonies through regulatory reinterpretation. District attorneys in several jurisdictions are prosecuting gun owners for technical violations involving no criminal intent or public safety threat. One man in California was charged with illegal firearm possession because his registered handgun serial number had partially worn off from normal use over 20 years. Think about that. A gun legally purchased, properly registered, worn down through decades of legal ownership, now the basis for criminal charges. These prosecutions serve a purpose beyond individual cases. They create fear and uncertainty that discourages gun ownership even among people who want to follow the law. This is a systematic approach making gun ownership so legally risky, financially expensive, and socially unacceptable that people voluntarily surrender their rights without any law being changed. Insurance companies price you out. Doctors document your ownership. Employers threaten your job. Banks track your purchases. Regulations create legal traps. Each pressure point alone seems manageable. Together, they form a comprehensive assault on Second Amendment rights that operates entirely outside the legislative process most Americans monitor. The president has gone public with intelligence exposing these coordinated efforts. The question now is whether gun owners will recognize what's happening before it's too late, or whether they'll wake up one day to discover their rights disappeared not through dramatic legislation, but through 1,000 quiet bureaucratic cuts.